The handcuffs were still tight on her wrists when the cell door slammed behind her, and the sound bounced off every wall like it would never stop. She is sitting on a concrete slab they call a bed, inside a cell that smells like cold metal and old fear, wearing an orange jumpsuit that barely stretches across her 8-month belly. The fluorescent light above her flickers every 4 seconds. She has counted. Counting is the only thing keeping her mind from breaking wide open. She is 31 years old. She is pregnant. She is completely alone. And the man who put her here, the man who pressed her hands behind her back in their own driveway, the man who whispered, "This is what you get," right before the officers snapped the cuffs. That man is somewhere out there right now, sleeping in their king-sized bed on 400 thread-count sheets, with her name already being erased from every document he controls. His name is Marcus Monroe, her husband of 4 years, the father of the child now pressing a heel hard against her ribs as if even the baby knows something is very wrong. Hi viewers, if you have ever trusted someone with everything you had, only to watch them turn that trust into a weapon, drop a comment below and tell us your story. And if you are watching this for the first time, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because what Marcus did next, and what Tasha did about it, will change the way you look at love, money, and power forever. What Marcus did not know, not even for a single second, was that his perfectly planned betrayal had one fatal flaw. A flaw he created himself. A flaw that was already sitting inside a manila envelope in a law office 47 blocks away, waiting to go off like a grenade. But Tasha did not know about that envelope yet either. All she knew in that cold cell at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday was that her water had not broken yet, her phone had been confiscated, and the one person she needed to call had no idea she was here. She pressed her palm flat against her belly and breathed through her nose. 10 hours. That was how long she had before Marcus's lawyer filed the emergency injunction that would freeze every joint account, seal her out of the house, and begin the custody petition for a child that had not even been born yet. 10 hours. And not a single person on the outside knew the clock was running. The cell was 7 feet wide and 9 feet long. Tasha knew because she had walked it 12 times in both directions, counting her steps, her hands pressed flat on either side of her belly like she was holding the baby in place by sheer will. There was a drain in the floor, a metal toilet with no lid, a cot bolted to the wall with a mattress so thin she could feel the frame through it when she sat down. The walls were painted a gray-green color that had no name for it except institutional. Tired, used up. She had been brought in at 9:23 p.m. She knew because the officer who processed her had looked at the clock on the wall when he stamped her file. She had made herself memorize that detail, memorize everything. That was the only edge she had. The charge on her booking sheet read, felony fraud, unauthorized transfer of funds. The amount listed was $214,000. She read that number 3 times and felt her stomach drop to the floor. She had never touched that money, not once. She did not even know the account number it had been pulled from. But Marcus did. Marcus had set up that account 14 months ago under a shell company called Bridgeport Capital Holdings LLC. She had signed something for it once. He had handed her a stack of papers during dinner and said it was a tax filing, nothing important, just a signature here and here and here. She had trusted him. She had been 6 months pregnant and tired, and she had trusted him. That signature was now the only evidence connecting her to $214,000 that had moved through an account she had never once logged into. He had planned this, not in a moment of anger, not in a fight that went too far. He had built the trap slowly, piece by piece, over more than a year, and then he had sprung it on a night when she was alone, when her closest friend Diane was out of town, when her mother was 3 states away in Memphis. The baby kicked hard, right under her ribs. She pressed her hand there and held it. "I know," she whispered, "I know." What she did not know yet, what she could not possibly know, was that 14 months ago, the same week Marcus set up Bridgeport Capital Holdings, he had made one very sloppy mistake. He had used his company laptop, and his company's IT server logged everything. At 12:31 a.m., the cell door opened and a woman was shown inside. She was somewhere around 50, short and wide-shouldered, with gray locks pulled back tight and eyes that had seen enough of this room to stop being afraid of it. She sat down on the opposite end of the cot without asking, pulled her knees to her chest, and looked at Tasha the way a person looks at someone they recognize even though they have never met. "First time?" she asked. Tasha nodded. "Thought so." The woman extended a hand. "Eivelyn, I've been in and out of this particular cell for the last 6 years. I know every crack in this ceiling." Tasha shook her hand. "Tasha, I can see you're in no condition to be in here." Eivelyn's eyes dropped briefly to Tasha's belly and came back up. "What did they say you did?" "Fraud, $214,000. Tasha's voice cracked on the number. "I didn't do it." Eivelyn nodded slowly like that answer did not surprise her one bit. "Who set you up?" The question hit like a slap, not because it was wrong, but because it was the first time anyone had said it out loud, plainly, without confusion or qualifiers. Tasha felt something move behind her eyes. She blinked it back hard. "My husband." Eivelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Does he have money?" "Yes." "Does he have a lawyer?" "The best one in the city, Richard Holt, Holt and Associates on 5th. Something shifted in Eivelyn's expression, a recognition. "Richard Holt." She said the name carefully, like she was turning it over in her hands. "I know that name." Tasha looked at her. "From where?" Eivelyn pulled a small, bent business card from inside the waistband of her pants, tucked there, invisible through intake. She looked at it for a long moment and then held it out to Tasha. The name on the card was Angela Reeves, civil rights attorney, and below the name in small print, wrongful prosecution, financial fraud defense, whistleblower cases. "She came here 3 weeks ago," Eivelyn said. "Left cards with every woman on this block. Said if any of us got set up by someone with money and a lawyer, we should find a way to call her before morning." Tasha stared at the card. "The guards change shift at 3 a.m., Eivelyn said quietly. "Officer Daniels on the 2nd shift, she's not the one they're paying. She'll let you make a call." And just like that, in a 7x9 cell at 12:31 a.m., the first thread of Marcus's perfect plan began to pull loose. But the night was far from over, and Marcus was not done yet. At 1:14 a.m., a guard Tasha had not seen before came to the cell door and looked in. He did not say anything. He just looked at Tasha, looked at her belly, then wrote something on the clipboard in his hand and walked away. Eivelyn watched him go and said nothing for 30 seconds. Then she said very quietly, "That was Patterson. He's the one they're paying." Tasha's mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" "It means someone on the outside told him to make sure your paperwork gets buried until after 8 a.m. If your paperwork gets buried, you don't see a magistrate until the 2nd session. 2nd session doesn't start until 10. By 10. By 10 it's too late," Tasha said. She already knew. She had been running the numbers in her head for the last 2 hours. Marcus's lawyer had filed papers on a Friday. If she was not in front of a judge by 9 a.m. Saturday, the emergency injunction would go through uncontested. Every joint account frozen. the house locked, and the custody petition on record for a child not yet born, named by a father who had just had the mother arrested, would have a 6-hour head start before she could respond. He had timed it perfectly, down to the shift change. She pressed her hands flat on her thighs and looked at the bent business card Eivelyn had given her. At 3:07 a.m., Officer Daniels came on shift. She was a tall woman, 40s, moved through the hallway with the kind of walk that said she had made peace with this job, but not with injustice inside of it. When she reached Tasha's cell, she paused, looked at the card Tasha was holding up against the bars, and read the name on it. She looked at Tasha's belly. She looked at the card again. "You've got 4 minutes," she said. "Make them count." Tasha's hands shook so badly she misdialed the first time. She steadied herself, pressed her palm to her stomach. The baby shifted, settled, and dialed again. It rang twice. Angela Reeves picked up on the second ring. It was 3:09 in the morning, and she answered like she had been sitting by the phone waiting. "Tell me everything," Angela said. "Start from the account number." Tasha talked for 3 minutes and 51 seconds without stopping. When she finished, Angela said 4 words that cracked the dark wide open. "I already have him." While Tasha was on that phone call, voice low, hands shaking, 3 minutes and 51 seconds to say everything, Angela Reeves was already awake. She had been awake since 2 a.m. She was sitting at her kitchen table in a gray sweatshirt with a mug of cold coffee beside her, and a folder open in front of her that she had read so many times, the pages had started to soften at the corners. The folder belonged to Jerome Webb. Jerome was 53 years old, IT systems manager at Monroe Property Group for 9 years. 2 years from retirement, diabetic, and for the last 4 months he had not been sleeping right. He would get up at 3 a.m. and sit in his kitchen, the same way Angela was sitting now, and think about what he had found on the company's server and what it meant and what would happen to him if he said something. He had found it by accident, a routine audit in July. A flag on an internal login pattern, Marcus's company laptop, accessing an external shell account called Bridgeport Capital Holdings 17 times between March and October. On the company network, during business hours, pulling documents, moving transfers, generating authorizations. Jerome had pulled one of the authorization files and read the signature line. Natasha L. Monroe. He had stared at that name for a long time. He knew Marcus's wife, had seen her at the company Christmas party 2 years ago, visibly pregnant even then with what turned out to be a false alarm, laughing at something near the food table. She had seemed like a person who did not know much about Bridgeport Capital Holdings, LLC. He had cross-checked the signature against every notarized document in the company's legal archive. The font was identical. The spacing was identical. It had been copied from a tax filing she had signed 18 months earlier and dropped digitally into a transfer authorization she had never seen. It was not her signature. It was her signature used as a stamp. Jerome had sat on that information for 11 weeks. He did not go to the police. 6 years ago, a man named Richard Holt had helped Marcus's father walk away from a workers' compensation fraud case that had cost Jerome's cousin his settlement and his apartment. Jerome knew what happened when men with money and Richard Holt's phone number met the legal system. So he found another name, Angela Reeves, wrongful prosecution, financial fraud defense. He had walked into her office on a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks ago with a hard drive in a plastic grocery bag, and his hands shaking so badly he had to set it on her desk instead of handing it to her. Angela had spent those 3 weeks building the case from the ground up. Forensic accountant, digital authentication expert, who confirmed in writing on day 9 that the signature was a lifted copy, not a hand-signed original. 17 server logs, all time-stamped, all traceable to a single device registered to Marcus Monroe on the Monroe Property Group network, which meant the company's own liability insurance carrier was now exposed to a $2.3 million clawback claim they did not yet know was coming. Marcus did not have a legal problem. He had a detonator sitting under his own building, and he had built it himself, keystroke by keystroke, on a laptop that logged everything. Angela had one piece missing. She had the fraud, the forgery, the server logs, but she needed the named party, Tasha, specifically to authorize the counterfiling. Without Tasha's signature on the authorization, the case sat on her kitchen table and went nowhere. And then at 3:09 a.m. her phone rang. She listened for 3 minutes and 51 seconds without saying a single word. When Tasha stopped talking, Angela said, "I already have him." She was in her car 4 minutes later, at the 24-hour courthouse filing window by 4:47 a.m. The counterfiling landed on Judge Patricia Osai's desk at 5:58 a.m. Judge Osai read it in 11 minutes. She was known for reading fast and deciding faster. At 6:22 a.m., she signed an emergency order. Not against Tasha. Against Marcus. The trap he had spent 14 months building had just become the evidence that buried him, and he was still asleep. Marcus Monroe did not hear his phone the first time it rang. He was in the shower at 6:44 a.m., standing under water so hot the bathroom mirror had completely fogged over, and he was in a good enough mood that he was humming. By 8 a.m., Tasha would be unreachable. By 9, the injunction would be stamped. By noon, Richard Holt had promised him the accounts would be frozen and the house would functionally be his alone. 14 months of planning, one night to execute, and it had gone perfectly. He stepped out of the shower and saw the phone screen lit up on the counter. 4 missed calls, all from Calvin. He called back. Calvin picked up on the first ring and said, without any greeting at all, "There are 2 federal marshals standing in our lobby." Marcus went completely still. Water dripped off him onto the tile. "What did you say?" "They have a court order." Calvin's voice had no warmth in it, no softness. 15 years of partnership and it was gone in a single sentence. "They want the company server, the whole server, Marcus, and they are asking where you are." The towel in Marcus's hand dropped to the floor. He did not notice. That's not possible," he said. His voice came out strange, thin. "They have a judge's signature dated 6:22 this morning." A pause. "There is something else." Marcus could not speak. "Holt called me 12 minutes ago. He is withdrawing from your case. He said to tell you he will be returning your retainer and that you should find other representation immediately." Another pause, longer this time. "Marcus, what did you do?" The line went quiet. Marcus stood in the steamed-up bathroom, barefoot, phone pressed to his ear, and felt the first real thing he had felt in 14 months of calculating and planning and constructing. Fear. Not the manageable kind. The kind that starts in your chest and moves down into your legs and makes the floor feel like it is tilting. He had used his company laptop 17 times on the company server. He knew that now, knew it the way you know something a second too late, the way the knowledge arrives already wearing the face of a mistake you cannot take back. He got dressed in 4 minutes, drove to Elmwood Drive instead of the office, some instinct pulling him back to the house, to the one place that still felt like solid ground. He turned onto the street at 7:03 a.m. and saw the 2 unmarked cars parked in front of the house before he even reached the driveway. He stopped the car in the middle of the road. A man in a dark suit was already walking toward him, holding a sealed envelope. Marcus sat in the driver's seat and did not move. His hands were on the wheel and they were shaking, and he could not make them stop. The man knocked on the window. Marcus looked straight ahead for 3 full seconds. Then he opened the door. He had 24 hours to appear before a federal magistrate. He had no lawyer. And the woman he had put in a cell the night before, the woman he had been so certain had nothing, had already been released for 41 minutes. He just did not know that yet. The lock turned at 7:41 a.m., and the sound of it was the best sound Tasha had ever heard in her life. Officer Daniels opened the cell door and stood to one side without ceremony, without explanation, without the kind of pity that would have felt like one more thing to survive. She just opened it and said, "Judge's order, you're out." Then, quieter, "There's someone waiting for you at intake." Tasha stood up from the cot. Her back screamed. Her ankles were so swollen she could feel her pulse in both of them. She had not slept a single minute. But she stood up straight, pulled the jumpsuit down over her belly as far as it would go, and she walked out of that cell on her own 2 feet. The hallway was the same gray-green as the walls. The fluorescent lights out here buzzed at a different pitch than the one in her cell. She noticed both of these things the way you notice everything when your whole body is running on pure nerve. Eivelyn was still inside. They had not said goodbye, there was no time, no privacy. But as Tasha passed the cell, she pressed her hand flat against the bars for 1 second. She did not look back. She just pressed her hand there and kept walking. Angela Reeves was standing in the intake area in a gray blazer with her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, holding a paper cup of coffee and a folder 3 inches thick. She was shorter than Tasha expected. Calmer than anyone had a right to be at 7:41 in the morning after no sleep. She handed Tasha the coffee first. Tasha took it with both hands. The heat of it moved all the way up her arms, and she had to press her lips together hard to keep her face from doing something she could not take back. "Here is what matters right now," Angela said, not softly, plainly, the way you talk to someone who needs information, not comfort. "The fraud charge is suspended pending review. That means functionally dead, it will not survive the week. The emergency injunction Marcus filed was denied by Judge Osai at 6:22 this morning. Your accounts are untouched. The house is still jointly titled." Tasha's throat was very tight. The custody petition. Withdrawn, his attorney pulled it when he withdrew from the case. "There is no petition, no record of a petition." Angela looked at her directly. "There is nothing." Tasha set one hand on her belly. The baby moved, that long, slow roll, not a kick, a stretch, like something releasing. Like even the baby had been holding its breath all night and could finally let it go. "He is now the subject of a federal fraud investigation," Angela continued. "Criminal prosecution. Your signature was forged, documented, authenticated, filed. Jerome Webb's hard drive has 17 separate server logs showing Marcus accessed the Bridgeport account from his company device. The forensic accountant finished her report at 4 a.m. She paused. "Tasha. He built his own case against himself. All we did was find it." The intake room was ugly. Fluorescent lights, plastic chairs, a water stain on the ceiling shaped like nothing in particular. Outside the window at the end of the hall, the early morning light was coming in at an angle. Not dramatic, just light. Ordinary, certain light. Tasha looked at it. 10 hours and 14 minutes she had been inside. 10 hours of a man being absolutely certain he had won. He had made one mistake, just one, and it was going to cost him everything. But if Tasha thought the worst of Marcus was behind her, she was wrong. Because Marcus Monroe, backed into a corner with no lawyer and a federal summons in his hand, was about to do the one thing that would turn a local fraud case into a national story. He was going to let his mother talk. In the 48 hours after his world started collapsing, Marcus Monroe tried 3 things. The first thing he tried was her mother. He called Gloria at 9:03 a.m. on Saturday, not from his own number, from a Google Voice account he had set up the week before, because even now, even in a full panic, some part of him was still calculating. He used a calm voice, a concerned voice. He said Tasha was unstable, that the pregnancy had affected her judgment, that the arrest had been for her protection, not his gain, that the baby would be better off with a father who had resources and stability than a mother who was in crisis. He said all of this in one smooth, practiced paragraph. He had rehearsed it. You could hear the rehearsal in every word. Gloria waited until he finished. Then she said, "My daughter called me at 8 a.m. from outside that jail. I already booked a 2 p.m. flight. Do not call this number again." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone. Then he tried the second thing. By 11 a.m., he had a new lawyer, a man named Dale Simmons, who had not yet looked closely enough at the file to understand what he was stepping into. Marcus had him send Tasha a settlement offer before noon. $180,000. Walk away from the house, the joint assets, and any legal claim against Marcus Monroe, now and forever. Angela put the paper in front of Tasha at a coffee shop 4 blocks from the courthouse. The offer was printed on crisp letterhead, very official, the kind of document designed to look like the only reasonable option in the room. Tasha read it once, turned it face down, pushed it to the edge of the table. "No," she said. Angela looked at her steadily. "If you take it, he walks. The fraud, the forgery, Jerome's entire hard drive, it folds into a civil settlement. He pays once, moves on, and does this to someone else." She paused. "If you don't take it, this becomes a criminal case, federal charges. His exposure is 4 to 7 years minimum. The insurance carrier wants $2.3 million back, and they are fully cooperating with the DA." Tasha looked at the upside-down offer at the edge of the table and felt nothing for it. Not temptation, not hesitation, nothing. "He does not get to walk," she said. That was the second thing he tried. The third thing Marcus tried was the one that destroyed what was left. At 2:17 p.m. on Saturday, while Tasha was at that coffee shop, while the settlement offer was face down on the table, while Angela was making notes in the margin of a legal pad, a woman named Sylvia Monroe stood at a microphone in the lobby of her church and spoke to 3 cameras and a cluster of reporters that Marcus had called personally the night before. Sylvia was 71 years old. She had a practiced, dignified calm that she wore like a coat. She stood with her hands folded and she said, clearly on record, that her daughter-in-law had always been financially motivated, that the pregnancy was a strategy, not a surprise, that the arrest had been the result of documented wrongdoing by a woman who had targeted her son from the very beginning. She said it all without raising her voice, without flinching. The video went up at 3:04 p.m. By 5 p.m. it had 600,000 views. By 6 p.m., 1.4 million. By 7 p.m., the comment section was a wall of fury from people who had watched a grandmother stand in a house of God and call a pregnant woman in a jail cell a gold digger. Marcus had called those reporters thinking the story would help him. He thought his mother's voice would shift the narrative. He thought a composed, elderly woman speaking calmly would read as credible. He was wrong about all of it, again. Because Jerome Webb was at home on his couch when the video started circulating. Jerome, who had stayed quiet for 3 weeks out of fear, who had carried that hard drive to Angela's office with shaking hands and spent 22 days hoping nobody would find out it was him. Jerome watched Sylvia Monroe stand in front of 3 cameras and defend the man who had forged a pregnant woman's signature. and something in Jerome went completely still. He picked up his phone. He pulled up every contact he had ever saved under the word press. He started at the top of the list and worked his way down. By 9 p.m. that Saturday, 6 journalists had his name, his title, and the words hard drive on their notepads. By Monday morning, the story was on national news. And Marcus Monroe's name, the name he had spent 14 months protecting, was attached to words like federal fraud, forgery, and company server in every headline. He had called those reporters himself. He had handed them the story. That was the moment Marcus Monroe stopped being a threat and started being a case number. 3 weeks after she walked out of that cell, Tasha sat on the bathroom floor of the house on Elmwood Drive at 2:17 in the morning and did not move for 41 minutes. Clara was asleep in the next room, 6 days old, 7 pounds 4 ounces of person who needed everything and understood nothing, and had no idea that the world she had been born into was still unsettled, still contested, still moving through courts and depositions, and 11 weeks of legal fighting that was not over yet. Tasha had gotten up to get a glass of water. That was all. She had been doing fine, or something that looked like fine from the outside, which was the version she showed Gloria and Angela and Eivelyn, who had been released 2 weeks earlier and was sleeping on the couch because she had nowhere else to go, and Tasha had told her to stay as long as she needed. She had gotten up for water and walked past Clara's room and heard the small, even sound of the baby breathing, and kept walking to the kitchen and filled a glass and stood at the counter and drank it. And then she sat down on the bathroom floor and put her back against the tub and did not get up. It was not one thing. It was the accumulation of all of it, the weight of 6 weeks of fighting while her body was also doing the enormous, unasked-for work of growing a person. The deposition she had sat through 8 days after giving birth, 4 hours in a conference room while Angela watched her like a hawk, and Marcus's lawyer asked questions designed to make her feel small. The 3 voicemails from Sylvia Monroe that Angela had intercepted before Tasha could hear them. The night feeds. The cracked skin on her hands from washing them too many times because the hospital had made her paranoid. The way the house still had his things in the garage that she had not been able to make herself sort through yet. And underneath all of it, a question she had not said out loud to anyone. What if it is not enough? Angela had the hard drive. Angela had the server logs. Angela had a forensic accountant and a digital authentication expert and 11 weeks of motions. But Marcus had money, had more of it hidden somewhere. She was almost certain. And Marcus had spent 14 months building this. And what if the one thing Tasha could not account for was the thing that undid all of it? What if she lost? Not the case. The case was solid. Angela had told her that a dozen times, and Angela did not say things she did not mean. But what if she lost something else? Her nerve. Her ability to walk into that courtroom in however many weeks and sit across from the man who had pressed her hands behind her back in her own driveway and whispered, "This is what you get," and not come apart. She sat there in the dark on the cold tile with her back against the tub and her hands in her lap and let herself feel it. All of it. The fear she had been holding in a fist since the night they brought her in. She let it go through her, let it be real, let it be large, let it be exactly as heavy as it was. Then she heard Clara. Not crying, just the small, shifting sound of a baby moving in her sleep. A breath, a murmur, nothing urgent, just the sound of someone existing. Tasha pressed her hands flat on the tile floor, pushed herself up. She walked to Clara's room, stood in the doorway. The nightlight made everything warm and orange, and the white crib cast a soft shadow on the yellow wall. Clara's hands were open beside her head, both fists uncurled, like she was sleeping without a single thing to guard against. Tasha stood there and looked at her for a long time. Then she went back to bed. She did not fix anything that night. She did not resolve anything or find some clean source of courage that made the fear go away. She just got up off the bathroom floor and kept going. That was all. That was enough. 6 months after she walked out of that cell, Tasha Monroe sat in a federal courtroom on the 4th floor of a building she had driven past 100 times without ever going inside. The room was smaller than she expected. Beige walls, brown carpet worn thin at the center aisle, fluorescent lighting, always fluorescent lighting, she thought, and almost smiled. The air conditioning hummed at a low, steady pitch, and the room was so quiet she could hear the person behind her breathing. She had been awake since 4 a.m., not from fear. From something harder to name. The feeling of standing at the edge of something that has been a long time coming and knowing that in a few hours it will be over, and you will have to figure out who you are on the other side of it. Clara was 7 weeks old. She was home with Gloria, sleeping in the white crib in the room with the yellow walls that Tasha had painted herself on a Saturday afternoon 3 weeks after she moved back into the house on Elmwood Drive. Angela had been there that day, sitting on the floor eating takeout, reading depositions, occasionally looking up to say things like, "The left side is uneven," until Tasha had handed her a roller and made her help. She thought about that afternoon now, sitting at the plaintiff's table. She thought about the smell of the paint and Gloria singing something in the kitchen, and the way the late afternoon light had come through the window and landed on the wall and made the yellow look almost gold. She pressed her hand flat on the table and steadied herself. Angela sat beside her, still and composed, the way she always was in rooms like this. A 17-page settlement agreement sat between them. Angela had negotiated it over 11 weeks of motions and counter-motions, and a deposition that had lasted 6 hours and produced, at hour 4, the moment where Marcus's own attorney had asked for a recess and come back 20 minutes later visibly different. Across the room, Marcus sat with Dale Simmons, his 4th lawyer since Richard Holt withdrew. Marcus was wearing a dark suit that did not fit him the way it used to. He had lost weight. His hands were clasped on the table in front of him, and he was looking at the surface of the table and not at anything else. He had not looked at her once since she walked in. Good, she did not need him to. The judge entered at 10:03 a.m., and the room stood and sat again, and the clerk read the case number into the record, and then it was simply, formally, procedurally happening. The terms were read aloud. 1 count of financial fraud, guilty. 1 count of document forgery, guilty. 26 months in a federal corrections facility. The $214,000 fraudulently transferred, returned in full to Natasha L. Monroe. An additional $187,000 in damages. Total, $401,000. Monroe Property Group's insurance carrier, in a parallel civil action already settled the previous month, had clawed back $2.3 million from Marcus's personal holdings and his equity stake in the company, which was now, effectively, nothing. The house on Elmwood Drive, solely and completely to Tasha. And then the custody terms. The clerk read them in the same flat procedural voice as everything else. Sole physical custody, sole legal custody, supervised visitation subject to future family court review. Tasha's jaw tightened. She had known those words were coming. She had read them 20 times. But hearing them spoken out loud in a room with a judge and a court reporter and a case number, hearing her daughter's future read into the official record, made something move through her chest that she had not expected. Not grief, not triumph. Something quieter than both, something that felt like, finally. The judge looked at the settlement agreement, looked at Marcus, looked at Tasha read the last page. Then she picked up her pen and signed it. 40 seconds. 14 months of planning, 6 months of fighting, and 40 seconds. Dale Simmons said something quietly to Marcus. Marcus nodded once. He stood up, and for just a moment, one single moment, he looked across the room directly at Tasha. She had thought about this moment, had imagined it many times in the past 6 months, lying awake at 3 a.m. while Clara slept in the next room. She had imagined feeling something large when it came. Anger, relief, satisfaction, some clean, final emotion that would tell her it was over. What she felt was nothing. Not emptiness, not numbness, just nothing. He was a man across a room in a suit that did not fit, a case number, a line on a settlement agreement. He had spent 14 months trying to make her into nothing, and somewhere along the way, without her entirely noticing, the thing she had been afraid of had become nothing instead. She looked away, not because she had to, because she was done. Angela's hand covered hers on the table, warm and brief. "It's done," Angela said. Tasha looked at the signed settlement agreement on the table in front of her. Then she looked at the window on the far wall, a high, narrow window, the kind that lets in light but not much else. The morning was gray outside, ordinary. "It's done," she said. She picked up her bag. She stood. She walked out of that courtroom through the heavy wood doors, into a hallway where the carpet was the same brown and the lights were the same fluorescent. And she kept walking, past the elevator, down the stairs, through the lobby with its security desk and its metal detector and its ordinary Friday morning crowd, and out through the glass doors and into the cold air outside. She stopped on the sidewalk. The city moved around her, cars, a woman walking a dog, a food cart sending up a curl of steam. Everything completely normal, everything completely unchanged. She stood there for a moment and just breathed. Then she pulled out her phone and called Gloria. It rang once. "Well," Gloria said. "It's done," Tasha said. "Go kiss Clara for me." She heard Gloria exhale, a long, shaking breath that carried 6 months of worry in it. And then she heard, in the background, the small, clear, uncomplicated sound of a 7-week-old baby making a noise for no reason at all except that she existed. Tasha stood on that sidewalk and let herself hear it. That sound, that small, ordinary, unbreakable sound. That was what she had been in that cell for. That was what all of it had been for. She put her phone in her pocket and started walking. The award was called the Eivelyn Bridge Prize. It was given every year by a coalition of women's legal defense organizations to an individual who had publicly advanced the cause of financial justice for survivors of domestic economic abuse. Tasha Monroe accepted it 11 months after she walked out of that courtroom. She stood at the podium in a room with 400 people in it and looked out at the audience for a moment before she spoke. Gloria was in the front row. Angela was 2 seats down. Eivelyn was next to her, in a green dress that she had bought herself with the first paycheck from the paralegal certification program she had enrolled in the month after her release. Jerome Webb was at a table near the back, his wife beside him, both of them looking a little stunned to be there. Clara was home with a babysitter, 8 months old, already pulling herself up on the edge of the coffee table, which was terrifying and magnificent. Tasha adjusted the microphone. "The night I sat in that cell," she said, "I had nothing, no phone, no lawyer, no money I could reach. 8 months pregnant on a cot that had no give in it whatsoever." A few people in the audience laughed softly at that. "I spent most of that night trying to figure out what I had done wrong, what I had missed, what I should have seen." She paused. "But here is what I know now that I did not know that night. The mistake was never mine. The planning was never mine. The fraud was never mine. He built that trap with his own hands. And the thing he never accounted for, the thing that brought the whole structure down, was not my lawyer or Jerome's hard drive or any of the rest of it. It was his own certainty that I had nothing. She let that sit for a second. He was wrong, and the proof of that is standing right here. The room came to its feet. Tasha waited until it was quiet again. You are not defined by what someone else planned for you, she said. You are defined by what you do in the 10 hours when everything is on the line and you cannot see any way out. That is when you find out who you actually are. I found out who I was in a 7 by 9 cell with a flickering light, and a woman named Eivelyn who handed me a business card she had hidden in her waistband. She looked at Eivelyn in the front row. Eivelyn pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling. Marcus Monroe is currently serving 26 months in a federal corrections facility. I do not think about him often. When I do, I feel nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction. Nothing. That is the most honest thing I can tell you. The moment he became nothing to me was the moment I became everything to myself. She paused, let the room sit with that. He did not break me. He just showed me how unbreakable I already was, and that is the one thing he never meant to give me. She picked up the award from the podium. Do not wait for someone to believe in you. In the darkest moment of my life, I found that the people who save you are almost never the ones you expected. They are the woman in the next cell, the IT manager who could not sleep, the attorney who answers the phone at 3 a.m. She held the award and looked out at the room one more time. Find your Eivelyn, be someone else's Eivelyn, that is all. The room rose again, and this time, Tasha let herself feel it, all of it, the warmth of 400 people who had chosen to believe that a woman who spent 10 hours in a cold cell could end up standing in a room like this. Clara was home, the house was hers, the accounts were hers. The name on the mortgage was hers alone. Marcus Monroe had planned the perfect trap, and every single piece of it had become the foundation she built her new life on top of. He gave her the fight that proved she was unbreakable. That was the one thing he never meant to give her, and it was the only thing that mattered. If this story moved something in you, if you know someone who is sitting in their own version of that cell right now, trying to find a way out, wondering if anyone is coming, share this with them. That share might be the moment they realize they are not alone. Drop a comment below. Tell us, what did Tasha do that you would have done differently? What would you have done first? We read every single one. Hit the like button, not for us, but because it puts this story in front of people who need it tonight. And if you want to be part of a community that tells these stories every day, stories of women who refuse to stay down, who found their way out of impossible rooms, subscribe right now. Join us. This is not just a channel. It is a record of what people are capable of when they have no other choice. You are not what he planned. You are what you chose to become after. See you in the next one.